The rain in downtown Los Angeles isn't soft. It's a cold, hard rinse. It hammers the asphalt, turning the neon glow of the Marrow and Mint sign into a watercolor bruise bleeding onto the wet street. I felt the vibration of the sign's electric hum through the soles of my shoes, a low-grade tremor that matched the one in my hands. I was 22, and I was hiding. My post, the sleek, ridiculously expensive oak hostess stand, had suddenly become a barricade. My fingers were slick on the screen of the restaurant-issued phone, fumbling the numbers. 911. LA Dispatch, what is your emergency? My voice was a squeak. There's a fight at Marrow and Mint on 7th in the private dining room. I was crouched so low my knees ached, trying to make myself small, trying to peer through the ornamental crack in the frosted glass partition that separated the lobby from the main floor. A fight, ma'am. Yes, I whispered, wincing, a sound like a bowling ball hitting a sack of rice a body, hitting a wall, then the sharp musical crash of a breaking bottle. Not a wine glass, a bottle, heavy. They're using bottles. I could see them. Snatches of motion, two men, expensive suits, faces red and twisted. They weren't drunk, they were furious. Another crash, this time a carafe of water, silver and glass exploding across a dark wood table. This wasn't on the syllabus. I'd memorized the employee handbook. I'm Lena Quintero, and I follow the rules. The handbook had a procedure. Page 42. Section 3. In case of physical altercation, Step 1. Report the incident to management. I'd done that. My shift manager, Yuri, was currently pale green and sweating near the service bar, wringing his hands. Step 2. Contain the situation. The heavy doors to the private room were closed, but the sound was leaking out, a poison in the air. Step 3. Ensure the safety of other guests. I'd already done that, my voice miraculously steady as I'd approached the 3 other occupied tables. Folks, I'm so sorry. It seems we have a plumbing emergency in the back. If you'd follow me, we'll get your checks comped at the bar. They'd left, grumbling about the inconvenience but oblivious to the violence erupting just 30 feet away. Only one guest hadn't moved. He sat in the darkest corner of the restaurant, a booth that was always requested and rarely granted. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't even looked up from the glass of water he was nursing. Through the entire thing, the shouting, the first impact, the glass, he just sat. I only knew his name was Zoran Jovanovic because his reservation was the only one on the books for that booth. Ever. He was maybe 34, 35. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my car, and his stillness was louder than the fight. He was watching. Not the fight. He was watching me. His eyes, even from across the room, were cold, analytical, like he was watching a rare fish in an aquarium decide which piece of food to eat. He was assessing a variable. "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger?" the dispatcher asked. Before I could answer, Yuri was at my side, his hand clamping down on my shoulder. His fingers dug in, sharp. "Oh, what are you doing?" he hissed, his eyes wide with a terror that was different from mine. It was a deeper, older fear. "I'm calling the police. Yuri, they're breaking things. They're—" "No." He swiped for the phone, but I pulled it back. "We don't call 911 here, ever. Are you insane, hang up?" "Someone's going to get hurt," I insisted. "You're going to get us all hurt. Hang up." I looked at him, at his desperate, pleading face, and then I looked back at the sliver of violence I could see. I pressed the button on the screen to confirm the GPS location. "Ma'am, I have your location. Officers are being dispatched." "Thank you," I breathed. I hung up. Yuri looked like he was going to be sick. "You've just lit a fire. Lena, a fire you can't put out." As if his words were a cue. The bell over the restaurant's main door chimed, but it wasn't the police. The doors to the private room burst open. A man. Deke Lomas, I knew him. He was a regular. Always too loud, always too handsy, staggered out. His tie was gone. His white shirt was splattered with red wine and something else. He was breathing like a bull. I instinctively recoiled, pushing myself back against the wall. Our security guard stepped forward. Trey was a mountain, a kind man who always brought his kids by on holidays. He was pure procedure. "Sir, I need you to calm down. Let's step outside." Deke didn't say a word. He just swung. It wasn't a movie punch. It was a messy, brutal hook that caught Trey on the side of the head. The sound was sickening. A wet thwack. Trey's knees didn't just buckle. They gave out. He crumpled, hitting the floor like a dropped coat. He was out before he landed. I screamed. I couldn't help it. Deke turned, his wild eyes fixing on the only other movement in the room. Me. He took a step. Enough. The word wasn't a shout. It was a low, resonant command, spoken with absolute finality. It cut through my panic, through the rain, through the buzz of the neon. The restaurant, which had been vibrating with violence, went utterly still. Deke Lomas froze, his head slowly turning toward the corner booth. Zoran Jovanovic rose. He didn't hurry. He moved with a heavy, deliberate grace. Placing his napkin neatly on the table, he was shadow and steel. As he stood, two other men materialized. I don't know where they came from. The kitchen, the shadows by the bar. They hadn't been there a second ago. One, tall and lean, moved like a panther. The other was built like a refrigerator, solid and blank. Orion and Cade. I'd learn later. They didn't rush Deke. They flanked him. Deke, still high on adrenaline, brandished the jagged neck of the bottle he was still holding. I hadn't even seen it. "Get back," he slurred. The two men didn't stop. The refrigerator. Cade simply raised a hand, talking in a low, calm monotone I couldn't hear. As Deke's attention fixed on him, the panther, Orion, moved. It was like magic, a blur of black motion, a twist of the wrist. Deke cried out, a short, sharp sound, and the bottle neck was gone, clattering harmlessly to the floor. Orion had Deke's arm bent behind his back, his face pressed against a decorative pillar. Before Deke even registered, the weapon was gone. It was over in 2 seconds. My breath was trapped in my chest. Zoran didn't even look at his men. He was still looking at me. My training kicked back in. My hands were shaking again, but this time with purpose. Trey was on the floor. He was hurt. I grabbed the phone. My fingers found the 3 numbers. 911. LA Dispatch. I just called about a fight. Yes, ma'am. Officers are almost there. I need an ambulance. A man is down. Security guard, he's unconscious. Blunt trauma to the head. I was relaying information, focused on Trey, but I felt the weight of Zoran's gaze. It intensified. His eyes narrowed, just slightly. It was the first flicker of something. Surprise interest. He was watching me choose the law. Even after he'd shown me he was watching me reject his power. I wasn't scared, I was angry. Trey was hurt because this restaurant had rules I didn't understand. The sirens wailed outside. Finally. 2 officers pushed through the door, rain dripping from their caps. And then the strangest thing happened. They saw the scene. Me, by the desk. Trey, on the floor. Deke, pinned to the wall by Orion, and Zoran, standing in the middle of it all, like a king. The lead officer's eyes met Zoran's. The cop's entire body language shifted. He didn't puff up. He deflated. He nodded, not a greeting, a deference. "Sir," the cop said, his voice carefully neutral, directed at Zoran. "This one," Zoran said, gesturing with his chin at Deke, "was disorderly. This one, he pointed to Trey, needs assistance." "We've received the report," the officer said stiffly. He and his partner immediately went to Trey, ignoring the perpetrator completely. Paramedics followed a moment later. The cops didn't ask me a single question. They didn't ask Zoran a single question. They spoke quietly to Cade, who handed Deke over. They didn't even put Deke in cuffs, just walked him out. They took my name and number from Yuri, who hovered near them, apologizing profusely. The whole thing was handled in under 5 minutes. Efficient, quiet, and wrong, all wrong. As the paramedics loaded Trey onto a gurney, the restaurant was finally empty, save for me, Yuri, and the men from the corner. Zoran walked toward me. I stood my ground, my chin up, though I felt like my bones had turned to water. He stopped a few feet away. He smelled like expensive wool in winter. "You keep your calm well. Lena Quintero," he said. His voice was just as I'd heard it, low, gravelly, and unhurried. "On this street, that's currency." He reached into his jacket. I flinched. He paused, his hand halfway, then he continued. Slowly. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a small, black card. It was thick, matte, and felt heavy. He didn't hand it to me. He placed it on the hostess stand. "You shouldn't have to work in a place where men like Deke Lomas feel comfortable," he said. And then he and his two shadows were gone. They didn't make a sound as they left. I looked down at the card. It was pure black. In the dim light, I could just barely make out an embossed logo, something silvery black, like an oil slick, the Argent Street Syndicate. There was no name, no number. "Throw that away," Yuri hissed from behind me. He was wiping down the bar, his hands moving frantically. "Don't look at it. Don't think about it. Stay away from him." "Who is he, Yuri?" "He's the man they don't call the police on," Yuri muttered. "He's the man the police call." I slipped the card into my apron pocket. I didn't know I had just been tagged. I didn't know I had just been entered into a ledger I couldn't see. My shift ended an hour later, at 2:30 in the morning. The rain had settled into a miserable, cold drizzle. I pulled my thin coat tight and started the 4-block walk to the bus stop on Olive. The street was empty. The city felt hollowed out. Halfway down the first block, I heard it, the low, wet growl of an engine, crawling. A black sedan, windows so dark they looked like polished stone, paced me from the other side of the street. It never got closer, never fell further behind. It just stayed. I walked faster. The sedan sped up. I slowed down. It slowed down. My heart was a fist, pounding against my ribs. I made it to the bus stop, a small glass shelter that offered no protection. I sat on the cold metal bench. The sedan pulled over to the curb about 50 yards away, its engine idling, its headlights off, just a black shape in the rain. My bus was 12 minutes away. It felt like 12 hours. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. I pulled it out. Unknown number. My stomach twisted. I opened it. "Never call 911 when you see Deke. You just signed your own death warrant." The air left my lungs. The rain was suddenly deafening. I looked up, panicked, at the black sedan. It was still there, waiting. Across the street, in the recessed doorway of a closed jewelry store, a man stood in the shadows, invisible to me. He was on his own phone, watching the sedan, watching the bus stop. Zoran Jovanovic lowered his phone. "Follow her," he commanded, his voice flat, "all the way to her door, but don't let her know. Stay in the shadow of the other car." I didn't sleep. Sleep wasn't possible. Not after the bus ride home. Every shadow on the street a threat. Every pair of headlights the black sedan coming back to finish the job. The anonymous text message burned on my phone's screen. A digital death warrant. I'd sat on my studio apartment floor, back against the door, until the gray light of morning leaked through the blinds. At 7:05 a.m., the knock came. It wasn't a fist. It was knuckles. 3 sharp official raps that vibrated through the cheap wood of the door. It was the sound of consequences. I looked through the peephole. 2 people. A man and a woman, both in plain, forgettable gray suits. They looked like auditors, not cops. I opened the door, the chain still on. "Lena Quintero," the woman asked. She was sharp, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held up a badge. "Agent Aria Senate, Bureau of Economic Integrity. This is Agent Hayes." The man, older, with a face like worn leather, just nodded. "Can we come in? Miss Quintero, we're following up on your 911 report from last night." "Bureau of Economic Integrity, not LAPD." My stomach hollowed out. I fumbled with the chain. They didn't look at my tiny apartment, the unmade sofa bed, or the sink full of dishes. They moved with a dry, bureaucratic purpose. Agent Hayes stood by the window, peering through the blinds. Agent Sennett sat at my tiny kitchen table. "You reported an altercation at Marrow and Mint," Sennett began, pulling a small digital recorder from her pocket. "You also requested paramedics for a Mr. Trevin Washington." Is he okay?" "He has a severe concussion and a fractured orbital," Hayes said from the window, his voice flat. "But he'll be fine. You, on the other hand, called the police on Deke Lomas." My blood ran cold. "He assaulted my coworker." "And the responding officers," Sennett continued, "their report is thin, very thin. They list the incident as minor disturbance. Suspect released. That's not what you reported." I don't know what to tell you. It was fast. The officer spoke to another man, a guest, Zoran Jovanovic. Then they just left, with Deke." Hayes turned from the window. "They spoke to Zoran." It wasn't a question. "And they let Deke go." "He's the man who gave the order," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The guest, Zoran. He told them enough. And they his men. They grabbed Deke." Sennett and Hayes exchanged a look. It was the look of two people confirming something they already knew. "Miss Quintero," Sennett said, leaning forward, her voice dropping, "Marrow and Mint isn't just a restaurant. We believe it's a high-volume laundromat for several organizations, a place where men like Lomas and Jovanovic can move dirty money through clean receipts." The words hung in the stale air of my studio. Money laundering. I shook my head. "No. I'm just the hostess. I check reservations, I seat people, that's it." "You're the hostess who saw everything," Hayes corrected me. "And you're the hostess who called the cops. That makes you a liability to them, and a potential asset to us." Sennett slid her card across the table. "We're opening a formal investigation based on your call. We'd like your full cooperation. In exchange, we can offer protective relocation." Protective relocation, like I was in a movie, like the black sedan and the text message weren't just idle threats. I have to go to work," I stammered, the only piece of normal I had left. "I have to think about this." Sennett nodded, her expression tight with something that might have been pity. "Don't think too long. Lena, the people you bothered last night don't have much patience." An hour later, I was in a rideshare. My hands clenched so tight my nails left half moons in my palms. My mind was reeling. Laundering, protective relocation. The driver had the radio on, some pop song thudding with a synthetic beat. The wipers hissed, clearing the morning drizzle. We were on Olympic, just passing the junction, when my phone buzzed, unknown number. I hit accept just as the world turned white. A massive white utility van, the kind with no side windows, swerved directly into our lane. It wasn't a drift. It was a calculated, aggressive move aimed right at my passenger door. "Duck." The voice on the phone was deep, resonant, and instant. It was Zoran Jovanovic. I didn't think. I dropped, curling into a ball, my head hitting my knees. The sound was a metallic scream. My driver yelled, slamming the brakes so hard I was thrown against the seatbelt. The van scraped the entire length of the car, metal shearing metal. My window, the one my head had been next to a second before, imploded, showering the seat in 1,000 tiny cubes of safety glass. Then it was over. The van sped off, never stopping, vanishing into traffic. My driver was screaming, a string of curses aimed at the fleeing van. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my throat. I was breathing in gasps. I was covered in glass. I slowly sat up, my hand shaking as I brought the phone back to my ear. The line was dead. I was 20 minutes late to Marrow and Mint, still picking tiny shards of glass out of my hair. I walked in the front door, and Yuri met me at the hostess stand. His face was pale, his eyes baggy. "Yuri, I'm so sorry. There was an accident." "You can't be here, Lena," he said, not meeting my eyes. He was holding a small white envelope. "What?" We're downsizing, reducing hours." He pushed the envelope at me. "That's 2 weeks' pay. We have to let you go." "You're firing me," my voice cracked. "Yuri, I was assaulted. Trey was attacked. I called for help." "And you shouldn't have," he finally snapped. his voice a low, terrified hiss. "I told you. You don't call them. You lit a fire. Now get out, Lena, before you burn the rest of us down with you." I stumbled back, the envelope in my hand, fired for calling 911. I turned, humiliated and furious, and pushed through the employees-only door to get my locker. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of watching me cry. I grabbed my purse and walked out the back exit, into the alley, the smell of garbage and rain. A difficult morning. I spun around. Cade, the refrigerator, was standing there. Then he was blocking the alley exit, his arms crossed over a chest that looked like a Kevlar vest. He wasn't in a suit today, just a black polo shirt that strained against his muscles. "Mr. Jovanovich would like to buy you a coffee," he said. His voice was flat, like gravel pouring onto pavement. "I'm not interested," I said, trying to push past him. He didn't move, and he just looked down at me. It was not a request. "Miss Quintero, he wants to discuss your employment situation and your car accident." My breath hitched. "How did you—" "This way." He gestured down the alley. A black town car, different from the sedan last night, was waiting. Cade opened the back door. It was the definition of an offer I couldn't refuse. The cafe was 5 blocks away, a sterile, new construction place with chrome fixtures and no customers. Zoran was in the back booth, a single cup of black coffee in front of him. He looked exactly as he had last night, a black suit, immaculate, and utterly still. I slid into the booth opposite him. Cade stood by the door, a silent sentinel. "You're fired," Zoran stated. "Thank you, I'm aware." "And you were nearly sideswiped by a white utility van, license plate 4 King Adam 987. I just stared at him. "You also received a threatening text message last night at 2:43 a.m. from a burner phone purchased at a convenience store in Burbank." He slid a thin manila folder across the table. I opened it. Inside were photographs, a picture of the black sedan from last night, its plate clear, a picture of the white van from this morning, timestamped just moments before it hit me, a printed log of phone numbers, my terror from the last 12 hours, itemized on cheap copy paper. My voice was shaking. Who are you?" He took a sip of his coffee. His eyes met mine over the rim of the cup. "I am the man who put your safety above a set of broken rules." The line hit me like a slap. My rules, the handbook. You called me in the car." "I did." Your people, you've been watching me." "We have," he said. No apology, no emotion. "I don't want this," I snapped, pushing the folder back at him. "I don't want to be protected by whatever this is. I'm taking this." I grabbed the folder. "To the police. To the BEI. Agent Sennett. I'm reporting all of it." I expected him to be angry. I expected him to threaten me. Instead, one of his eyebrows just barely arched. It was the smallest flicker of surprise. "Agent Sennett, from the Bureau of Economic Integrity," he said, tasting the name. "They were at your apartment at 7:05. I froze, the folder halfway off the table. "You're right, Lena," he said, his voice softening. "Just a fraction. You should choose the law. I respect that. So if you choose the law, I will clear the way for you." He leaned forward. "But the law isn't fast enough. The law can't stop a van that's already in your lane. The law can't stop a bullet that's already left the chamber. The BI wants to use you as bait. I want to keep you alive." He reached into his pocket and placed something small on the table. It was a pin, fashioned from dark, polished metal, shaped almost like a stylized wing, a mercury pin. I'd learn. "I won't ask you to lie for me. I won't ask you to be silent. My only condition is this: you don't lie to me, and you wear this." I looked at the pin. "What is it?" "An alarm. You press the center. My people will be at your location in 90 seconds, or less." 90 seconds. The BEI hadn't offered anything like that. They'd offered relocation, a new life, running. Just as I was about to refuse, my phone buzzed on the table. A new text from Deke Lomas. "Lena, I am so sorry about last night. I was drunk and out of line. I can't apologize enough. Can I please meet you? Make it right." My stomach turned over. Before I could even process it, a second text came in. "Agent Sennett, Deke just reached out to you, didn't he? This is our chance. We want you to accept. Meet him. We'll have you wear a wire." I stared at the two messages. A perfect trap. Bait. Zoran was right. Zoran watched my face, his expression unreadable. "It's a setup," he said, "not a guess. They'll have you in the open, and Deke's people, or Madigan's crew, will try to silence you. The BEI will be too far away to stop it." I looked up from the phone, my fear hardening into something else. A cold, sharp resolve. I wasn't going to be a pawn for the BEI, and I wasn't going to be a protected asset for Zoran. I was going to be myself. "I'm going," I said, my voice steady. Zoran frowned. "They will hurt you." "I'm going," I repeated, "but in a public place, my choice. I'll wear their wire, but I'm also wearing your pin." Zoran stared at me for a long, heavy silence. The air in the cafe was thick with the unsaid. He was assessing me again, like he had at the restaurant, but this time, it was different. He finally gave a short, sharp nod. Then I picked the place. He stood up, leaving a $20 bill on the table for a $3 coffee. He paused for a moment, looking down at me. The cold, analytical light in his eyes had been replaced by something else, a brief, tiny flicker. It was respect. He saw the grit, not the girl. And in his world, I was starting to realize that was the only thing that mattered. Zoran's choice of location was the Art Bridge Flea Market, a sprawling mass of tents and tables crammed onto a wide concrete plaza bordering the LA River. It was the opposite of the sterile, quiet cafe. It was chaos. Agent Sennett was not happy. "This is a tactical nightmare," she hissed, fitting the wire to the inside of my blouse. We were in the back of an unmarked BEI van, parked 2 blocks away. The van smelled like stale coffee and surveillance equipment. There were 100 exits, 1,000 places for a handoff. He picked this place to make our lives difficult. Or to make it public, I countered, trying to keep my voice from shaking. The wire felt cold against my skin. Agent Hayes handed me a tiny earpiece. "You'll have a 3-man team in the crowd. We'll be on you. But you have to give us a signal if he moves you. The safe word is cancel." I looked at the earpiece, then at the mercury pin Zoran had given me, which I'd clipped to the inside of my waistband. One alarm for the law, one for the man outside it. I felt like a walking contradiction. "Just get what he says." "Lena," Sennett said, her voice softening, but it felt practiced. "Get the apology. Get any reference to last night. That's all we need." I nodded, my throat dry. I stepped out of the van. The sun was hot, the air thick with the smell of frying tortillas from a row of taco trucks and the dusty, herbal scent of sage from a vendor selling crystals. A live band was playing salsa music, loud and energetic, creating a wall of sound. This wasn't a nightmare. It was a fortress of noise and witnesses. Zoran was smart. I walked into the flow of people. My BI-issued canvas tote bag bumping against my hip, I spotted my protection instantly. A man in a Dodgers cap pretending to look at handmade jewelry. A woman with a stroller who looked too fit to be a casual shopper. They were obvious. They were clumsy. I tried to breathe. I was bait. I saw Deke waiting near the concrete barrier overlooking the river. Just like he'd said, he was holding a bouquet of flowers, not expensive roses. They were cheap carnations, the kind you get from a supermarket bucket, already wilting in the heat. He saw me and plastered on a smile. It was the smile of a salesman, all teeth and no warmth. "Lena, thank you for coming. God, I'm so embarrassed." I stopped a good 5 feet from him, crossing my arms. "Deke?" The microphone in the wire was live. I could feel the faint hum of the battery pack taped to my back. "Please," he said, pushing the sad flowers toward me. "These are for you. As an apology. I wasn't myself the other night. I was under a lot of pressure. Mixed some medication with alcohol. It was a mistake. It won't happen again." The words were smooth, rehearsed. This was a performance. You put my friend in the hospital. Deke, I said, my voice harder than I expected. And I'll pay for it, he said quickly. All of it. Trevin's medical bills, his lost wages. I'll write you a check right now. Just I need this to go away. I can't have a 911 call on my record. He took a step closer. Please, Lena, just tell the cops you made a mistake, that it was just a misunderstanding. I felt my hand drift toward my waistband, near the pin. I didn't see any of his men, but this felt wrong. Don't touch her. The voice was low, and it wasn't Deke's. It was in my head. No, not in my head. The earpiece, the BI earpiece, but that wasn't Hayes's voice. It was deep, calm. My blood froze. I looked up, past Deke's shoulder, scanning the area, across the plaza. A 6-story concrete parking garage overlooked the entire market. On the 3rd level, I saw a glint of light, a reflection, sunlight hitting glass. Binoculars. What? Deke asked, confused by my sudden distraction. The voice came again, cutting through the salsa music. He's not alone. Sniper, rooftop, across the river. They're not here to talk. Lena. They're here to clean up. It was Zoran. He was on their frequency. He'd hacked the BEI. What the hell is going on? Agent Sinead's voice crackled in my ear. Panicked. Who is on this channel? Deke, I said, my heart hammering. I can't. It started. A high-pitched whine, like a giant mosquito, cut through the music. People looked up. Drone, someone yelled. A small, black quadcopter, no bigger than a dinner plate, dive-bombed the space between me and Deke. It hovered for a split second, and then a cloud of orange mist exploded from its underside. Pepper spray. It hit my lungs first, a chemical fire. I doubled over, coughing, my eyes instantly sealing shut with a blinding, searing pain. The crowd screamed. People were pushing, shoving, running. The band stopped. Thwack! A sound like a fastball hitting a metal sign. Thwack! Thwack! Sniper rubber bullets. Zoran's voice in my ear was pure command. No panic. Orion, now go! I was blind. I was choking. I was being trampled. A sharp, stinging pain slashed across my cheek, a ricochet or a direct graze. I was hit. My hand tore at my waistband, my fingers fumbling for the pin. I found the smooth metal and jammed my thumb into the center. I screamed as someone grabbed me. It wasn't a shove. It was a steel wall, a body, impossibly solid, slammed into mine, shielding me from the crowd. A hand clamped over my mouth and nose, not to hurt me, but to cover me. Got you. Breathing shallow, I'm moving you. It was Orion, the panther. I didn't even know where he came from. It felt like he'd dropped from the sky. A second later, I was off my feet, my face pressed into a shoulder that smelled like clean cotton and ozone. He was carrying me, moving with a speed and purpose that defied the stampede of people. I heard a thwack hit his back. The sound was dull, heavy, and he didn't even grunt. He just kept moving. He plunged us into a small, dark space, a vendor's kiosk. He slammed the wooden door shut, plunging us into near darkness, the screams and chaos outside suddenly muffled. You're safe, he said, setting me down. My lungs were on fire. My cheek was screaming. My eyes were streaming tears I couldn't control. I collapsed against a stack of boxes, trying to breathe. The door burst open. Light flooded in, and Zoran Jovanovic filled the frame. He wasn't in a suit. He was in dark jeans and a gray Henley, and it somehow made him more intimidating. His eyes swept the small space, landing on me, crouched and weeping. Orion was already at the door, facing out. Report, Zoran said. Sniper neutralized, package secured. Orion replied. Took one, non-penetrating. Deke Lomas ran west side toward the bridge. Kate is tracking. Zoran knelt in front of me. Let me see. Don't touch me, I gasped, the words choked by the pepper spray. He didn't listen, but he didn't use his bare hands. He pulled a pair of black nitrile gloves from his back pocket and snapped them on. The sound was sharp, sterile. You're bleeding, he said, his voice flat. He produced a small first aid kit, the kind soldiers carry. This will sting. He used a sterile wipe on my cheek. The sting was sharp, but the cold of it cut through the burn. I hissed, flinching. "Stay still," he commanded. He was all business, his movements practiced, efficient. He tilted my chin up, his gaze locked on the small cut. His eyes were dark, and for the first time, they weren't cold, they were contained, like a furnace door, locked, but with fire blazing behind it. His thumb, covered in the black glove, brushed a tear off my other cheek. The gesture was shockingly gentle. He applied a small butterfly bandage with a surgeon's precision. The kiosk door flew open again, slamming against the wall. Agent Sennett stood there, gun drawn, flanked by Hayes and another agent. They were panting, their faces red. They'd come late. Sennett's eyes took in the scene. Me, on the floor, being tended to. Zoran kneeling over me like a protector. Orion standing guard. Her gun didn't waver. It pointed right at Zoran. "Get away from her, Jovanovic." Zoran stood up slowly, his hands held away from his body. "A little late, Agent Way," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You set this up," Hayes accused, his own gun out. "This whole thing, the drone, the sniper a goddamn hero rescue, all of it, just to get your hooks into her." I found my voice. It was raw, hoarse. "No, you were late. You left me out there." His voice, he warned me. I looked at Sennett. "He was on your comms. He told me about the sniper before he ever fired." Sennett's face went pale. "I'm not at war with the law, Agent," Zoran said, stripping off his gloves. "I just use it to peel back worse evils." He reached into his pocket. Both agents tensed. "Gun!" Hayes yelled. Zoran froze. "I'm reaching for a USB drive. My hand is coming out slowly." He pulled out a simple silver thumb drive. He tossed it lightly onto a stack of T-shirts. "What's that?" Sennett asked, her gun still steady. "Deke Lomas's virtual transaction ledgers. Every dollar he's washed for the Madigan crew for the last 6 months. It's all there. The real files, not the dummy copies he keeps for you. Now, if you'll excuse me, Miss..." Quintero is in shock. He turned to me, offering a hand. I looked at his hand, then I looked at the BEI agents, who were staring at the USB drive like it was the Holy Grail. I saw it. Right then, the two worlds, the BEI, with their wires and their safe words, always half a step behind, willing to let me get hurt to catch a fish, and Zoran, with his shadow army and his impossible resources, who hacked their network and put his own man in the line of fire to pull me out. I took Zoran's hand. He pulled me to my feet. My apartment felt different that night. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a cheap box with bad locks. The BEI had driven me home, taken my statement and left, buzzing about the USB drive. They hadn't left a guard. I was sitting on my sofa bed, the new bandage on my cheek feeling tight. I'd just turned off the lamp. The streetlights outside cast weak, orange shadows on the wall. The light in the kitchen clicked off. I hadn't touched it. I sat bolt upright. The refrigerator's hum died. The whole apartment went dark, a circuit breaker. I heard it, the scrape of a boot on the fire escape, the squeak of my old window frame, the one with the broken lock I'd always meant to fix. It slid open. A figure, a bulky shadow against the slightly less dark rectangle of the window, climbed through. He moved silently. A black mass in my living room. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. My hand flew to my waistband. The pin wasn't there. It was on the nightstand, beside the bed. The shadow took a step toward my bed. He never made a second. A blur of motion erupted from the darkness by my closet. It was Orion. He'd been in my apartment the entire time, waiting in the dark. There was no sound of a fight, just a choked, wet gasp. Orion had the intruder from behind, one arm locked around his throat, cutting off his air, lifting him off the floor. The man's legs kicked uselessly. The light in the hallway outside my door clicked on. Zoran Jovanovic was standing in the threshold. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing the same dark, functional clothes from the market. He looked at the struggling man, then at me, huddled on the bed. "You're packing," he said, his voice low and absolute. "You're not safe here anymore." The intruder went limp in Orion's grasp. I can't," I stammered. "I can't just run. I have a life." Zoran looked at me, his expression unreadable in the dim hallway light. He saw the panic, but he also saw the defiance. He was giving me an order, but I was rejecting it. He took a small step back, a gesture of concession. It was the most powerful move he could have made. "You're right, you don't run," he said. "So you choose the place, any place you want to go, and I will make it safe. If I choose the place, I choose somewhere you don't belong." My voice was thin, but it didn't tremble. We were standing in my ruined apartment, the neutralized intruder a dark lump by the door, already being silently packaged by Orion. Zoran looked at me, waiting. "No more dark corners of LA, I said. No more high-end restaurants or downtown shadows, somewhere open, somewhere empty. I thought of the emptiest place I knew, Palm Desert. There's a motel off the 10 freeway, by a gas station. The sand and sky, it's nowhere. Zoran nodded once, as if I'd chosen a fortress. "Cade, book it." "Book what?" I asked. "A room?" "All of them," Zoran said, as if it were obvious. "The entire row." The 2-hour drive was silent. We were in a black SUV that was indistinguishable from 1,000 other black SUVs in California. It was just me, Zoran driving and Cade in the passenger seat. Orion, I assumed, was somewhere behind us or somewhere ahead. I felt like a package being transported. The heat hit us the moment we exited the vehicle. It was 4 in the afternoon in Palm Desert, and the air was a physical weight, over 110 degrees. The sky was a vast, bleached-out blue. The sand and sky was exactly as I remembered. A single-story, L-shaped building painted a peeling shade of tan. A dead pool was fenced off in the center. The only other business was the gas station, its sign buzzing in the oppressive heat. It was, indeed, nowhere. Cade handed me a key card. Room 7, Zoran took room 6, and Cade took room 8. The rest of the motel, 12 other rooms, remained empty. "My team is installing proximity sensors and cameras on the perimeter," Zoran said. Standing in the doorway of my room, the room smelled like industrial cleaner and dust. The air conditioner was rattling like it was about to die. "No one will approach this building without us knowing." He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since the alley. The bandage on my cheek felt stark. "Get some rest, Lena." He closed the door, and the lock clicked. I was alone, but I wasn't. I was in the most secure, most isolated prison in the desert. We spent 2 days in that furnace, 2 days where the only sounds were the rattle of the AC and the distant roar of trucks on the freeway. Orion and Cade were ghosts. I only saw them when they delivered sealed bags of food from a drive-thru 20 miles away. Zoran and I were the only 2 real people. We sat outside in the evenings, on the metal chairs by our doors, watching the sunset, painting the mountains purple and orange. The heat was still a tangible thing, even in the twilight. The silence was louder than the fight at the restaurant. On the second night, I broke it. "Why are you doing this?" He was watching the gas station, his eyes never still. "You asked me who I was. I told you. I keep people safe who the rules fail." "That's not an answer. That's a mission statement. I mean, why do you do this?" He was silent for a long time. The buzzing of the neon motel sign was the only sound. "You follow the rules, Lena," he finally said, his voice low. "You believe in them, the handbook, the 911 call, the BEI. You think the rules are a shield. They're supposed to be. I was raised in a place that taught me rules are a weapon, or a cage, depending on who's holding them." He looked at me, his gaze uncharacteristically distant. "I grew up at St. Axiom's Home for Boys. I'd never heard of it." "It was a private institution, an orphanage," he clarified, "but it was funded by interested parties. We weren't taught algebra. We were taught the rules of survival. Rule 1, Never be the first to bleed. Rule 2. Always know your exits. Rule 3. Information is worth more than any currency. Rule 4. Loyalty is a transaction until it's not. I stared at him. He wasn't a man from a family. He was a product. Forged. That's awful. It was practical, he said, rejecting the pity. It's why I knew the BEI was baiting you. It's why I know Deke is just a dog on a leash. What about you? Why do you trust the rules so much? I looked down at my hands, because the alternative is chaos. My mom, she was an alcoholic, a bad one. Our whole life was chaos. Eviction notices, strange men in the apartment, pawned belongings. The only time I ever felt safe was at school, where there was a bell, a schedule, rules, a piece of paper that said if you do A and B, you get C. I've spent my whole life trying to build a wall of rules around me, and the first night I saw you and Deke Lomas, you blew the whole wall down. He nodded, a slow, understanding gesture. You're not building a wall, Lena. You're building a cage for yourself. He wasn't the first, was he? The man in your apartment last night? My breath caught. How? Your window, he said. The lock wasn't just broken. It was jimmied, over and over, and the landlord never fixed it. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. Her last boyfriend, he kept showing up, after she passed, looking for money. Zoran's jaw tightened. Rule 5. Lena, make your own sanctuary safe. The law failed you long before you ever called 911. We sat in that shared, heavy silence. He, the boy who learned to weaponize the rules. Me, the girl who tried to hide behind them. At 2:17 in the morning, the proximity sensors chirped. I was awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling. The chirp was soft, coming from a small device Zoran had placed on my nightstand. A second later, Cade's voice was in the room, low and urgent, from an intercom I hadn't even known was there. Zoran, vehicle, east perimeter, no lights. I heard Zoran's door open in the motel's breezeway. Then, a knock. A polite, cheerful knock on my door. What is it? I called out, my heart leaping into my throat. Morning milk delivery, a cheerful voice replied. Milk delivery, at 2 in the morning, in the middle of the desert. Zoran's voice was a roar from outside. Lena, get down, get in the bathroom, now! I didn't hesitate. I rolled off the bed and scrambled toward the bathroom. A small, tiled box. Cade, Zoran yelled. It's a microwave trigger, the truck. I heard Cade outside my door. It's not the truck. It's on the cart. He left it. A metal milk crate, on a small dolly, right outside my door. I'd heard it rattle. I dove into the bathtub just as Zoran kicked my door open. He wasn't running from the door. He was running to it. He grabbed the thin, flimsy mattress from the bed frame and upended the metal mini-fridge. He was building a barricade. It was insane. It was useless. Sir, Cade yelled, get back. It's on a timer, Zoran bellowed back. He threw himself, not away from the door, but toward me. He dove into the small bathroom, landing half on top of me in the tub, his body a solid, heavy shield over mine. Cover your head, he commanded. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling my face into his chest. I was surrounded by the scent of him. Clean soap and something metallic. I felt his heart. It wasn't racing. It was a heavy, steady thump, thump, thump. The world ended. It wasn't a loud bang. It was a deafening crack pop. A flash of brilliant white light, so bright it burned through my closed eyelids. The air pressure changed instantly, sucking the breath from my lungs and then slamming it back. The window in the bathroom didn't just break, it atomized. The mirror over the sink exploded. The main room sounded like a giant had taken a baseball bat to everything. Glass, drywall, and plastic shrapnel filled the air. I screamed into Zoran's shirt. I was shaking. A full-body, uncontrollable tremor. He held me tighter. His arm locked over my head, his body absorbing the shrapnel that flew into the bathroom. I felt him jolt. Once. Twice. but he didn't make a sound. Then silence. The ringing in my ears was the loudest thing in the world. "Lena?" His voice was a low rumble, right against my ear. "Are you hurt? Can you move?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my face still buried in his chest. I was vibrating, my teeth chattering. "You're okay," he murmured. "I have you. You're okay." His heartbeat, thump, thump, thump. It was the only solid thing in the universe, a metronome, an anchor. I clung to him, my fingers digging into the fabric of his shirt, and just shook. We moved before dawn. The sand and sky was a wreck. The device, Cade explained, was a small, directed microwave pulse bomb, designed to flash boil liquid or a person. It had shredded the room, turning every piece of glass into a projectile. The new location was a place I never would have found. It was a custom-built house in the hills, disguised as a commercial cactus greenhouse, all glass and steel, but the glass was ballistic, and the floor plan was a maze. "A friend's," Zoran said. "Someone who values the fifth rule." It was cool inside, the air humid from the exotic plants. It had hidden doors and a subterranean exit. It was a fortress. We were closer now. The explosion had burned away the pretense. He spent the next day teaching me, not just his rules, but his trade. "They're watching for a tail," he said, pacing the glass-walled living room. "So you don't use one. You use a leapfrog. Car A follows for 2 blocks, ducks, car B picks you up. You're not looking for the same car. You're looking for the same model." He taught me how to use the reflection in a shop window, how to use the camera on my phone in selfie mode to watch my back. "See that car, he's pacing you. Speed up, walk faster. If he speeds up, he's a tail. Now stop. Pretend to tie your shoe. If he doesn't pass you, if he suddenly finds a reason to stop, you're burned." In return, I taught him. Agent Sennett had been texting. The BEI was nervous. The USB drive Zoran had given them was gold, but it was encrypted in a way they were struggling to crack. They needed my testimony for a secret grand jury hearing to get the warrant. They were sending me the case files. "This report is useless," I told Zoran, scrolling through the BI's prep notes on a secure laptop. "It's all adjectives. The suspect was hostile. The transaction was suspicious. A grand jury will tear this apart." He looked confused. "It's factual." "It's not. It's an opinion." I pulled up a blank document. "You don't write." He was angry. "You write." His fist was clenched, his voice was raised 2 octaves, and the vein on his temple was visibly pulsing. "You don't write suspicious. You write." He exchanged a briefcase for a plain manila envelope, did not check the contents, and left in a separate vehicle. "Words are weapons. Zoran, you just have to know how to aim them." He watched me type. He watched me reframe their weak case into a narrative of cold, hard facts. He was a master of physical rules. But this was my territory. "A secret hearing," Zoran said, reading the final text from Sennett. "They want you downtown, Friday." "I have to go." "I know." He paused. "I'll take you, but I'll be invisible." We spent that afternoon practicing my testimony. I was grilling him, making him play the part of the defense attorney. "Mr. Jovanovic, how can you be sure my client was the one who—" "I object," Zoran read stiffly from my notes, "to the term per perpetuate." He stumbled over the legal jargon. He, the man who could command a room with a word, who could analyze a firefight in a split second, was completely lost in the language of my world. A laugh escaped me. It wasn't a giggle. It was a real, sharp bark of laughter. It was the first time I'd laughed in what felt like a year. Zoran looked up, his brow furrowed. "What?" "Nothing," I said, trying to smother the smile. "It's just perpetuate. You sounded like you were ordering a hit on the word itself." His expression softened, the corners of his mouth, which I'd only ever seen in a flat line, twitched. It wasn't a smile, not really, but it was close. The air in the room, which had been sterile and focused, suddenly shifted. It became warm. Later, we were cleaning up, putting the files away. We both reached for the same bottle of water on the table. Our hands brushed. It wasn't a graze, it was a connection. His fingers, calloused and warm, against the back of my hand. It was like a live wire, a static shock that jumped from my hand, up my arm and straight into my chest, making my heart skip a beat. We both froze. We looked at our hands, then at each other. The space between us was suddenly electric, filled with everything we hadn't said. The rescue at the market, the terror in the bathtub, the shared confessions in the desert heat. I pulled my hand back, and he pulled his back, as if we'd both been burned. Neither of us said a word. We didn't have to. We both understood. Something new, something terrifying and unspoken, had just been confirmed in the glass house full of cacti. The New Harbor Federal Annex wasn't a courthouse. It was a data center that pretended to be an office building, a windowless, concrete cube in a part of the city that had no name, just freeway overpasses. Zoran's invisible escort was truly invisible. I was dropped off by a nondescript rideshare, and Agent Hayes was just there, waiting at the curb, holding a disposable coffee cup. "You're clear," he said, not looking at me. "Walk in. Don't look back." I walked in. Zoran, Orion, Kate, they were nowhere. They were everywhere. I felt their presence like a change in the air pressure. The room I testified in was small, cold, and smelled like burnt coffee and ozone from the servers. There was no judge, just a panel of 3 grim-faced grand jurors and a federal prosecutor. Agent Sennett stood in the corner, arms crossed. I sat at a long, polished table, a single microphone in front of me. I thought of my mom's chaotic apartment. I thought of the motel room, vibrating before it exploded. I thought of Zoran, stumbling over the word perpetuate. I took a breath, and I used my words as weapons. I didn't say Yuri was scared. I said Yuri's hands were shaking. He told me, quote, "You've just lit a fire you can't put out." I didn't say the police were deferential. I said, the officer's first word was sir, directed at Mr. Jovanovich, not at the perpetrator. He did not take my statement. He took his orders from Mr. Jovanovich. For an hour, I laid out the facts, the hostess stand, the bottle, the punch, the black sedan, the white van, the text message, the man in my apartment, the milk crate. When I was done, the room was silent. The prosecutor looked at Sennett. The data on the drive backs her up. "It does more than that," Sennett said, stepping forward. She placed a large photograph on the table. It was an aerial shot of a massive warehouse complex. The encrypted data on that USB, it's not just ledgers, it's a key. It unlocks the shipping manifest for this place, Port Florentine, a private, deep-water port up the coast. "A port for what?" a juror asked. "For this," Hayes said, placing another photo down. It was a server, thousands of them stacked in racks in a climate-controlled room. Deke Lomas, the man who started the fight, he's a nobody. He's bait. The real organization is the Madigan crew. Sennett's voice was sharp, energized. They're not just washing cash through restaurants. That's small time. They are washing hundreds of millions through online gaming server farms. They buy virtual assets in Asia, transfer them digitally, and sell them here for clean U.S. dollars. The servers at Port Florentine are the hub. Zoran Jovanovich's USB drive just gave us the map. My head was spinning. This was so much bigger than a restaurant. So much bigger than Deke. There's one more thing. Lena, Sennett said. Her voice was suddenly gentle, which was more alarming than her usual sharpness. The restaurant. We've been pulling security footage from the businesses around it. We found something from the night before the fight. She turned a laptop around to face me. This is from a jewelry store camera, across the street, time-stamped at 10:14 p.m. The video was grainy, black and white. It showed the alley behind Marrow and Mint, a figure I recognized instantly. Deke Lomas was standing there, smoking. Then, the back door of the restaurant opened. Yuri, my manager, stepped out. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't scared. He looked casual. He clapped Deke on the shoulder. He handed him a thick white envelope. Deke pocketed it, laughed, and they stood there talking for another 2 minutes before Yuri checked his watch and went back inside. The air left my lungs. It felt worse than the pepper spray, worse than the explosion. The man who had hired me, the man who had begged me not to call the police, who had acted terrified. He wasn't scared for his restaurant, he was scared for himself. He was in on it. The fight Deke wasn't just a regular, he was an associate. The whole thing. He sold me out, I whispered. My voice was hollow. He knew. He was part of it. My workplace. It wasn't just a front, it was a trap. Yuri was their inside man, Hayes said. He managed the cash flow. He was protecting the operation, not you. That night, at the restaurant, I had been the only person in the room who wasn't in on the secret. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute. It made me sick. Sennett drove me from the annex. The BEI was triumphant. They had their case. "We'll be in touch about Yuri," Sennett said as we merged onto the freeway. "For now, just lay low. Your part is done. Thank you. Lena, you did a good thing." We were in a standard BEI sedan, part of a 3-car convoy, one in front, one behind, standard protection. We entered the 3rd Street tunnel, a long, narrow tube of yellow light and white tile. It happened fast. A dark gray van that had been 2 cars ahead of us suddenly slammed on its brakes. Our lead car swerved, hitting the wall. The car behind us was blocked by a tow truck that seemed to materialize from another lane. We were boxed. "Trap!" Sennett's driver yelled, hitting the brakes. We screeched to a halt. And then I saw them. 2 men in black, jumping out of the van. One had a device. He ran to our car. Sennett was fumbling for her weapon. Back up, back up. Click, clack, thump. A sound from under the car, a heavy, metallic thump, like a giant magnet locking onto the chassis. "Mine!" the driver screamed. "He's attached a—" The side door of our car was ripped open, not by the men outside, by Orion. He was just there. He must have been in the lead car. His face was a mask of pure, cold focus. "Out now, Zoran, cover." He didn't pull me. He threw me, shoving me out the door and onto the concrete. I rolled, scraping my hands and knees. Zoran was at the mouth of the tunnel, his car blocking the entrance, firing not a pistol, but something that sounded like a cannon, suppressing the men from the tow truck. Orion wasn't looking at them. He was in our driver's seat, shoving the BEI agent into the passenger's chair. Sennett was frozen, her gun half raised. "It's on a delay," Orion yelled. He slammed the car into reverse, then cranked the wheel, executing a perfect J-turn, spinning the car 180 degrees in the narrow tunnel. He stomped on the gas. The car shot backward, away from me, away from Zoran, toward the men from the van. They scattered, diving for cover. "Orion, no!" I screamed. He wasn't in the car. He had bailed out, rolling across the asphalt just as the car passed him. He was on his feet, grabbing me, pulling me behind the pillar of Zoran's SUV. "Get in!" He threw me into the back seat. Zoran was already in the driver's side. 3 seconds later, the BEI sedan exploded. The sound was a physical blow. It was not a pop. It was a concussion that rattled my teeth and punched the air from my lungs. A ball of fire and shrapnel erupted in the tunnel, vaporizing the car and sending a shockwave that blew out the windows of every other vehicle. We were already moving. Zoran floored the SUV, driving over the median, and plunged us into a dark service access road I never knew existed. We didn't speak a word all the way back to the greenhouse. The mood was fractured. The BEI had lost a car and nearly 2 agents. Sennett was alive, but shaken. Zoran had saved them. But the victory was hollow. Zoran was on the phone, his back to me. He was speaking in a language I didn't recognize. His voice was not calm. It was a low, angry snarl. He hung up and stood for a full minute, staring at a rare white cactus. "What is it?" I asked. "The tunnel," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "That wasn't Madigan's crew. Not their style. It was too precise, too military." "Then who—" Orion and Cade entered the room. Cade looked pale. Orion looked angry. "Ellie, it was an inside job," Orion said, his voice tight. The route from the annex, the timing, the specific trap. They knew our convoy pattern. Zoran turned, his face carved from ice. Who? All encrypted comms from the last 48 hours point to one node, Orion said. He wouldn't look at Cade. One burn phone. The signal trace, it's Cade's. The air in the glass house went thin. I looked at Cade, and he was the refrigerator, the silent guardian, the man who had invited me to coffee, who had found the bomb at the motel. No, Zoran said, a simple, flat denial. Sir, Orion pressed, the data is clean. The uplink was from his device, routed through a proxy, but it's his signature. He sold the route. No, Zoran said again, louder. He's been with me since St. Axiom's. He's my blood. The data is wrong. Find another answer. I swear. Zoran, Cade stammered, his hands open. It wasn't me. You know me. I know the data. Cade, Orion snapped. You're compromised. Enough. Zoran's voice cracked like a whip. The two men fell silent. The team was broken. The loyalty that Zoran had built his entire life on it was cracked, right down the middle. Zoran turned and walked out, leaving us in the suffocating silence. I couldn't sleep. The explosion replayed in my head, the sound of the mine clicking onto the car, the look of betrayal on Yuri's face. It was 3 a.m. I got up for water. The house was dark, lit only by the faint blue glow of the greenhouse sensors. As I passed the main atrium, I saw a shadow detach itself from the wall. It was Cade. He was in black, moving silently toward a sliding glass door on the far side of the complex. He thought everyone was asleep. He was sneaking out. My heart was in my throat. Orion was right. He's a traitor. I followed him, keeping to the shadows, my bare feet silent on the cool tile. He slid the door open and stepped out into the cactus garden. He looked around, then moved behind a large boulder. I watched from the window. He was placing something. He put a plain manila envelope under a loose stone, then turned and slipped back inside, heading toward his own room. I waited. My pulse was a hummingbird in my chest. I waited until I was sure he was gone. Then I ran. I ran to the boulder, my hands shaking. I pulled the stone away. The envelope was there. I ripped it open. It wasn't money. It was photographs. My stomach dropped. They were of me. A picture of me walking into the BEI van at the flea market. A picture of me getting into the rideshare to go to the annex. A picture of the car Zoran and I had taken to the desert. And underneath them, a single sheet of paper. It was a schedule. My schedule. My movements, past and future, including a note, witness hearing, NHFA, Friday, 1400. He hadn't just sold the route. He was selling me. I ran back inside. I didn't care about being quiet. I slammed into Zoran's room. He was sitting in a chair in the dark, fully dressed. He'd never gone to bed. Lena, I threw the envelope on the table in front of him. He's a traitor. My voice was a choked sob. I saw him. He was leaving this for them. Zoran opened the envelope. He looked at the photos of me. He read the schedule. His face, which had been torn with doubt, hardened. The doubt was gone, replaced by a cold, absolute certainty, the kind of certainty that gives orders that can't be taken back. He had to choose, kill his oldest friend or set a trap. He stood up, his eyes never leaving the photos. Orion, he called. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Orion was at the door a second later. Sir, he's making a drop. He's confirmed his status as a traitor. Zoran's voice was devoid of all emotion. We're not going to stop him. We're going to use him. Set a trap. I want the person who's pulling his strings. He turned to me. The fire was back in his eyes, the contained, controlled furnace. You, he said, are not leaving this room. You're not to go near a window. You're not to speak to anyone. You're in my protection. 100%. No more BEI. No more walks. You're here. Safe. The words hit me. The glass house. The man I'd laughed with. The man I'd clung to in the explosion. He was gone. This was the boss. No, I said, my voice shaking, but firm. I'm not your prisoner. Zoran, I won't be a a display piece in a glass case. I'm a person. He took a step toward me. He was close, so close I could feel the heat rolling off him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch me. He just looked into my eyes, and his were filled with a raw, desperate intensity I'd never seen. "You are," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Just once. You are the one person I will not let drop." The trust in his team was gone. The world was at the gate. All he had left was me, and all I had left, God help me, was him. The greenhouse was no longer safe. Cade's betrayal, real or staged, had burned it. Zoran didn't speak as we drove, his silence a heavy, cold thing, heavier than the armored plating of the SUV. Orion drove, his eyes constantly moving, checking every mirror, every overpass. Cade was gone, taken in a separate vehicle, a ghost in Zoran's machine, now being used as bait for a much larger trap. The new sanctuary was a place called Silver Vesper Studios, a defunct, forgotten film studio from the 1940s. Tucked away in an industrial part of Burbank, it was a massive, barn-like soundstage, its corrugated tin roof echoing with the sound of a new storm. The rain hammered against the metal, a relentless, drumming rhythm that drowned out the rest of the world. Inside, it was a cavern of shadows. Old sets, covered in drop cloths, looked like sleeping giants. The only light came from a string of battery-powered storm lanterns that Orion had hung, casting pools of warm, yellow light in the vast darkness. It smelled like dust, damp wood, and ozone. "No one's used this place in 20 years, Zoran said, his voice the first sound in an hour. He dropped a heavy duffel bag on a stack of prop trunks. No power grid, no data lines. We're off the map. He turned to me. I was rubbing my wrist. The adrenaline from the tunnel explosion had faded, leaving behind the throbbing, raw scrape on my palm and forearm from where Orion had thrown me onto the asphalt. It was caked with dried blood and grit. Zoran saw it, and he didn't say anything. Just walked to his duffel bag, retrieved the same first aid kit from the flea market, and motioned to a dusty velvet armchair. "Sit." I sat. He knelt in front of me, just as he had in the kiosk. He snapped on a pair of black gloves. The sound was sharp, sterile, familiar. He took my hand. His grip was firm, but his touch was impossibly gentle as he turned my arm over to inspect the damage. The scrape was angry and red. "This needs to be cleaned," he said, his voice flat, all business. He uncapped a bottle of antiseptic. "This will sting." I braced myself, but I didn't wince when the liquid hit my skin. The sting was nothing compared to the last few days. He worked with that same focused, practiced efficiency, his movements slow, deliberate. He cleaned every piece of gravel out of my skin with tweezers, his brow furrowed in concentration. My breath hitched. It wasn't from the pain, it was from the contact. This wasn't a rescue. This wasn't a life-or-death maneuver. This was care. His thumb, covered in the glove, was warm as it braced my hand. I could feel the heat of him, kneeling so close. The sound of the rain on the roof was a deafening drum, but the silence between us was louder. He began to wrap my wrist in a clean white bandage. His hands, which I knew could be weapons, moved with a tenderness that made my throat tighten. "You're shaking," he observed, not looking up. "It's just cold." He finished wrapping the bandage, securing it with a small piece of tape. He didn't let go of my hand. He just held it for a second, his gloved thumb resting on my pulse. I watched his face, the hard lines of his jaw, the way the lantern light caught the intensity in his eyes. "You're a bad liar, Lena!" He let go and stood up, turning his back to me. Stripping off the gloves, the moment was broken. While Orion set up a secure satellite link in the corner, monitoring the trap he and Zoran had set for Cade's handler, Zoran paced. He couldn't be still. The betrayal of his closest man, or the ruse of it, was eating at him. He was a creature of control, and his world was spinning. "We need to practice," he said suddenly. "Practice what my testimony has done." "No, movement. If we have to move through a crowd, we can't be two people. We have to be one entity, like the flea market, but smoother. He walked over to an old prop table where a battery-powered radio sat. He twisted the dial, static hissed, and then a faint, tinny sound emerged. An old AM station playing music from a generation ago, some crooner singing about the moon. "What are we doing?" "A safety drill," he said. "Stand up." I stood wary. "Give me your left hand." I did. He placed it on his right shoulder. "My hand goes here," he said, placing his right hand lightly on my lower back, just above my hip. "Not a dance. Lena, a transfer of balance. Now, step when I step. Mirror me." He stepped forward. I stepped back. He stepped left. I stepped right. We moved in a small, awkward circle. "You're fighting me," he said. "Don't anticipate. Just feel my lead. Match the rhythm." The song was slow, the rain was fast. We moved across the dusty floor, a strange, silent drill, shoulder to shoulder, our bodies close, moving as one. I stopped thinking and just moved. I learned to feel the subtle shift in his shoulders, the pressure of his hand, and I mirrored it. He changed the rhythm, moving against the beat of the song. I followed. He sped up, then slowed. I followed. We were breathing in sync. He stopped, but he didn't let go. We were standing in the center of the dark soundstage, the music barely audible over the storm. My hand was still on his shoulder. His hand was still on my back, a point of impossible warmth. Our foreheads were almost touching. I could feel his heart, a steady, strong beat that matched my own. Thump, 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 the same anchor I'd felt in the bathtub. His lips were inches from mine. He wasn't looking at them. He was looking into my eyes. "I used to think strength was needing no one, Miwan," he whispered, his voice rough. "I built my entire life on that one rule, St. Axiom's, the syndicate, total self-reliance." His eyes searched mine. "And then I saw you, crouched behind that desk, terrified. And you still called 911? You chose the rules, even when you knew they were broken." My own hand, the one he had just bandaged, came up. I didn't know I was doing it until my fingertips rested on his chest. Right over his heart, I could feel the solid muscle beneath his shirt. "I was scared," I whispered back. "I was terrified. Zoran, but I was more scared of what would happen if I did nothing. I was more scared of becoming the kind of person who just lets it happen." He looked at my hand on his chest, then back at my eyes. The question was there. It wasn't a movement. It wasn't a word. It was in the way his gaze softened, the way his breath caught. He was asking for permission. I gave it. I don't know if I leaned in or if I just stopped holding myself back. I think I just nodded. Once. Barely a movement. He closed the distance. The kiss was soft. Softer than I could have imagined. It was tentative. A question. It was just his lips. Warm and dry. Brushing against mine. There was no pressure, no demand. My hand moved from his chest to his shoulder, my fingers gripping the fabric. His hand on my back held me steady. A safe harbor. He pulled back, just a fraction of an inch, just enough to look at me again. "Are you sure?" And this time, I leaned in, and the kiss deepened. It was still respectful, still slow, but it was real. It was the desert heat and the cold rain and the shared terror and the strange, grudging respect. It was the anchor and the fire and the man who had stumbled over, perpetuate, and the man who had shielded me with his own body. It was a release of all the tension, a long, slow exhale. His lips were firm and his hand moved from my back to my shoulder, holding me securely. The world outside, the rain, the danger, the betrayal, it all dissolved into a warm, emotional haze. There was only the sound of our breathing, quiet and shared, and the feeling of his heart, beating in time with mine. The morning was cold, the rain had stopped, and the air in the soundstage was damp and still. When I woke up, on a cot Orion had set up, Zoran was already across the room, hunched over the satellite link. He was back to business. I sat up, and he looked over. The easy, professional distance we'd had before was gone, but it wasn't replaced by easy intimacy. It was replaced by something charged, an awareness. When his eyes met mine, they held for a second too long. He cleared his throat. Orion's team picked up the handler who retrieved Cade's package, he said. All business. The data trail is active. I walked over, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders, and the money the Madigan crew's laundered money, it all flows to one place before it goes offshore, a central vault, and it's not at Port Florentine. He pointed to the laptop screen, a blueprint, the Nova Meridian Casino in Reno. A casino vault. The most secure one in the state, he said. But the data from the USB, combined with what Cade's handler just gave us, it's not just a map, it's a key, a digital vulnerability, but it's time-sensitive. The vault resets its encryption keys every 72 hours. We have one window. When? Tomorrow night, they're hosting a high roller charity gala. The one night of the year they open the vault for client displays. So we go in. Not we, Zoran said. And not me. I'm a known quantity. My face, it's not welcome in places like that, and Orion is needed to run the tech side of the breach, and Cade is bait. He turned to me. The boss was back, but his eyes were different. You're going in. Me, Zoran, I'm a hostess, not a spy. You're Ashlyn Hart, he said, his voice flat. A new money art collector from San Francisco. You have a confirmed invitation, a $5 million credit line, and a keen interest in their private collection. You're the one person they won't be looking for. For the next 4 hours, he taught me. He taught me my new life, my favorite artists, the galleries I supposedly owned. And he taught me the signals. We'll be in your ear, he said, but if the comms drop, you use your hands, we'll have a camera on you. He touched his own collarbone. A light tap. It means danger, get out, abort. He brushed his hand past his ear. It means listen, I have intel, be quiet. He held his palm out, flat, fingers together, aimed at the floor. It means stop, do not move, do not speak, freeze. I practiced, over and over, my new name, my new life, the signals. Before we were set to leave, he stopped me. We were standing by the soundstage door, the first real sunlight in days streaming in, illuminating the dust motes. Ashlyn Hart wouldn't wear a bandage, he said, looking at my wrist. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out. Not a weapon, not a piece of tech, but a silver chain. It was impossibly thin, delicate, with a small, flat clasp. He held it out. Your hand. I gave him my bandaged hand. He gently undid the tape and unwrapped the bandage. The skin was healed, but red. He fastened the chain around my wrist. It was so light I could barely feel it. It's not a shackle, he said, his voice low, his fingers brushing my skin as he fixed the clasp. It's a silent comms channel. The clasp, it's a panic button, a redundant signal. If you can't tap your collarbone, you press that hard for 1 second. I looked at the delicate, beautiful chain against my skin. It was a tracker. It was a lifeline. It was a leash. I looked up at him. I'll wear it like armor. A faint smile touched his lips. Good, let's go to Reno. The Nova Meridian was a symphony of planned chaos. It wasn't just a casino, it was a city-state of light, sound, and desperation, built in the middle of the desert. The air chimed with the sound of 1 million digital jackpots and smelled like stale smoke, expensive perfume, and free-flowing alcohol. I was Ashlyn Hart. I wore a charcoal gray dress that felt like liquid silk against my skin. It was understated, elegant, and had cost more than my entire year's rent. My hair was up, and the delicate silver chain on my wrist was my only jewelry. I walked with a confidence I didn't own, my head held high, my gaze appraising. Zoran was my shadow. He wasn't Zoran Jovanovic, the boss. He was Mr. Jovanovic, my personal security detail. He was magnificent in a tailored tuxedo, his presence a dark, gravitational pull. He never spoke. He just watched, his eyes sweeping every room, every face, his hand resting lightly on my back as he guided me through the throng of high rollers. He was the most believable part of my disguise. Comms check, Orion's voice whispered in my ear. A tiny, flesh-colored device hidden by my hair. Camera feed is live. You look the part. Ashlyn, now. Find your target, Pierre Dubois, head of Vault Acquisitions. I spotted him near the baccarat tables. I used the lines Zoran had taught me. I talked about obscure art, about the difficulty of securing private transport for sensitive sculptures. Dubois, a man who looked like a well-fed peacock, was eating it up. Zoran stood 5 feet behind me, a silent, menacing promise of my importance. But, of course, Mademoiselle Hart, Dubois gushed. After 30 minutes of my performance, a collector of your stature must see the Tier 3 collection. It is where we keep the unconventional acquisitions. Right this way. He led us past velvet ropes, through a door marked private, and into a corridor of brushed steel. My security, I said, gesturing to Zoran. Naturally, Dubois said, not even blinking. Men like him were used to men like Zoran. The vault was less a room, more a bank, a circular, glass and steel chamber. Dubois led us inside, to a private viewing room. Orion, Zoran's voice, not in the room but in my ear. Dubois is leaving the door keypad active. He trusts you. I see it, Orion whispered back. 2 minutes. Lena, that's the window. The data port is behind the environmental control panel. Look to your left. Dubois was showing me a diamond necklace. From the Habsburg. Zoran stumbled. It was the most ungraceful movement I had ever seen him make. He lurched forward, bumping into a small table, sending a glass of champagne tipping. My apologies, he rumbled, his voice deep. Dubois turned, irritated. Please, be careful, that's a... It was all I needed. 2 seconds. My hand darted to the panel, a small, magnetic latch. I popped it open. The port was there, a simple data jack. I pulled the Moth 7 chip from a hidden pocket in my dress. It was no bigger than my fingernail. I lined it up. It clicked into place. A tiny green light flashed. Once. Download initiated. Orion's voice was tight in my ear. It's working. 20%. I snapped the panel shut. My head of security, I said, turning back, my voice bored. So clumsy. You'll be cleaning that up. Dubois. Dubois, flustered, nodded. Yes, of course. Everything was perfect. It was too perfect. The main vault door, the circular, steel one, hissed open. But it wasn't Dubois' assistant. It was Agent Aria Sennett, and she was flanked by 4 BEI agents in full tactical gear. Their weapons were up, pointed directly at Zoran. Zoran Jovanovic, Sennett snapped, her voice echoing in the steel room. You are under arrest. Hands where I can see them. My blood turned to ice. My body, my entire world, went cold. Agent Sennett, what is this? I stammered, my Ashlyn persona shattering. A trap. Zoran, Sennett said, ignoring me, her eyes locked on him. We couldn't touch you in your fortress. We couldn't get near you. But we knew you wouldn't let her walk in here alone. She sneered. Your one weakness. You had to come yourself. This was never about the vault. It was about you. Zoran didn't move. He just watched her. His hands were raised, palms out. A good plan, Agent, he said, his voice calm. But you're half a step too late. Am I? Sennett smiled, and then the door opened again. Cade walked in. He wasn't in his usual black. He was wearing the same BEI tactical vest as the other agents. He was carrying a federal-issue sidearm. I think I made a sound, a small, choked gasp. My mind just broke. The photos, the schedule, the betrayal. Cade's been our deep cover asset for 2 years. Zoran, Sennett said, savoring the moment. He's been feeding us everything, St. Axioms, the Argent Street Syndicate, you... Cade looked at me, his face grim. Lena, the photos, the schedule I dropped that was to save you, to get you out of his world and into ours. The tunnel attack. The Van Madigan was moving on you. I was sending intel to the BEI to intercept, to get you clear, not to sell you out. He was protecting you, Sennett said, from him. Zoran looked at Cade, not with anger, not with betrayal. He just looked at him with a profound, bone-deep sadness. You chose your side. Cade. Download at 70%. Orion's voice was a frantic whisper in my ear. Lena, we have a bigger problem. The casino floor. They're not BEI. Madigan's crew. They're here. They're storming the pit. As if on cue, the casino's main alarm system erupted. Not a fire alarm, a security breach, a loud, repetitive whoop whoop whoop. Senate's radio crackled to life. All teams, we have multiple armed hostiles on the casino floor. They've breached security. Deke Lomas is leading them. A three-way standoff, us, the BEI, in the vault, and Madigan's crew, out on the floor, now fighting the casino's private security. They were all here. They're locking us in, Dubois shrieked, pointing at the vault's blast door, which was slowly grinding shut. Senate was torn. Her primary target, Zoran, was here. But a full-blown firefight was erupting outside. Seal the door, she yelled at Dubois. This is a secure location. No, I shouted. If you seal it, we're trapped. They'll cut the air. In the chaos, Zoran was no longer the target. He was just another person in the room. He looked at me, then at the wall. I followed his gaze. A small, red box, a fire alarm pull station. I didn't think, I ran. Lena, no, Senate yelled. I slammed my hand into the bar and pulled. The effect was instantaneous, a deafening, clanging bell. And then, a hiss. The sprinklers. A deluge of cold, gray water rained down from the ceiling, the vault, the casino floor. Everything was instantly soaked. People screamed. The strobe lights of the fire system kicked in, turning the scene into a series of frantic, flashing photographs. And, as I'd hoped, the fire system overrode the security system. The mag-locked emergency exits all over the casino floor clicked open. The crowd, which had been a panicked mob, now had a path. They surged toward the exits. Download complete. Orion's voice was calm in my ear. We have it all. I'm dumping it to the BEI main server right now. It's done. Lena, get out. The vault door was open. We were in the middle of a war zone. Water. Smoke from a flashbang that had gone off near the slot machines, and screaming people. Move! Cade yelled, grabbing me. He shoved me toward the nearest exit. Senate was trying to drag one of her agents, a man whose leg was bent at an unnatural angle. He'd been hit by a stray shot from the casino floor. I can't move him. Zoran didn't say a word. He moved through the water, his tuxedo jacket gone. He hooked his arms under the injured agent, hoisted him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, and started moving toward the exit, all in one fluid motion. Sene just stared, her gun hanging at her side, water dripping from her hair. The MAFIA boss she'd spent 2 years trying to catch was saving her agent's life. Go! Lena, go! Cade yelled, pushing me from behind, covering our retreat. A shot rang out, impossibly close. It wasn't meant for me. It was aimed at Cade, Deke Lomas, standing on a gaming table, his face a mask of rage. Cade grunted, a sharp, punched-out sound. He stumbled, slamming into me. Cade. I saw the blood, a dark stain, spreading rapidly across his shoulder, mixing with the sprinkler water. He'd taken the bullet meant for me. Go! He roared, and shoved me hard into the flashing red light of the exit. We spilled out into the night. It was a sea of flashing red and blue lights, ambulances, fire trucks, police cars. Zoran laid the injured BI agent gently on a gurney. Paramedics swarmed him. He turned to me. His tux was ruined. His white shirt was soaked and translucent, clinging to him. His hair was plastered to his skull. He was magnificent. He had just saved a federal agent. He had just participated in a firefight. He had just been unmasked. His life, the one he had built in the shadows, was over. He was exposed. Cade was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, a paramedic cutting his vest off. He looked at Zoran, his expression a mixture of pain and apology. Arya Sene walked toward us. She was soaked, shaking, and her face was a war of emotions. Her plan had worked, but it had failed. She had her man, but he was also the hero. Zoran looked at me. His eyes were dark, and for the first time, I saw an exhaustion in them that went all the way to his soul. He gently took my arm and sat me down on the dry end of the ambulance bumper, a silent, final act of protection. Stay here. He turned to face Arya Sennett, and, as the chaos swirled around them, he slowly, deliberately, held out his wrists. Keep her safe, he said, his voice just for Sennett. I'll take my turn. Sennett stared at his wrists, then at his face. She took a breath, her resolve hardening. This was the end game. She pulled out her handcuffs. I saw the metal. I surged forward, grabbing his hand just before the cuff clicked shut, my fingers locked with his. Don't disappear, I whispered, the words a desperate, breaking plea. Soren, don't... He didn't look at Sennett. He didn't look at Cade. He looked at me. He held my gaze, his fingers squeezing mine for one brief second. He didn't say a word. And then the metal clicked. They led him away. The New Harbor Detention Center was a gray, concrete monolith that seemed to suck all the color from the sky. I sat in a small, sterile interrogation room, the kind with a two-way mirror I was sure someone was behind. Agent Sennett sat across from me. She looked exhausted, her professional anger from the casino replaced by a weary frustration. He's not talking, she said, rubbing her temples. He hasn't said one word since you let go of his hand, just sits in his cell, stares at the wall. So, what you're charging him? With what? Sennett shot back, her voice sharp. Illegal possession of a firearm? I have an agent who'll testify Zoran saved his life, resisting arrest. He walked right up to me and held out his wrists. His lawyers are from Godspeed and Wayne. They're not just good, they're mythical. They arrived an hour after he did. They're already arguing he was a cooperating witness, acting under duress. My heart, which had been a cold stone in my chest, gave a small, painful flicker. He's not your enemy. Arya, not the real one. He's not my friend, Lena, she said. He's the head of the Argent Street Syndicate. He's a criminal. He's the only reason your case against Madigan even exists, I said, my voice rising. The USB, the Moth 7 chip, the data, my God, the data he got you all while you were pointing a gun at his back. Sennett was silent. She knew I was right. His lawyer just made an offer, she said, her voice dropping. He's taking a plea. No, he's offering a trade. The door opened, and a man in a $3,000 suit walked in. He was older, with sharp blue eyes and silver hair. Miss Quintero, I'm Marcus Wayne. I represent Mr. Jovanovic. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He just announced his presence. He turned to Sennett. My client is prepared to offer full, immediate cooperation regarding the Madigan cruise shipping routes. Every port, every shell company, every transport. He will burn their entire physical network to the ground for you. Sennett's eyes narrowed. In exchange for what, a walk? In exchange, Wayne said, for a temporary 48-hour furlough under the Cooperative Work Detail Statute and a complete dismissal of all charges related to the events at the Nova Meridian. He gives you Madigan. You give him a pass on this one. That's insane, Sennett scoffed. I can't let a man like that just walk out. You can't, Wayne asked, his voice silky, or you won't. This was my moment. This was the one thing I had, my voice. Agent Sennett, I said, my voice clear and steady. The two of them turned to look at me. At the Marrow and Mint, Zoran Jovanovic stopped Deke Lomas from doing more harm. At the flea market, his man, Orion, shielded me from gunfire while your agents were delayed in the tunnel. Orion saved your life and the life of your driver. At the casino, Mr. Jovanovic personally carried your injured agent to safety while under fire. He has prevented violence at every turn. He has delivered the case against Madigan on a silver platter. And he has saved the lives of federal agents. I will testify to that, under oath, at his hearing or at yours. The room was dead quiet. Lena Quintero, the ex-hostess, the civilian liability, had just laid down the law. I was her star witness, and I had just become his. Sennett stared at me, her jaw working. She saw the truth. I was her political cover. Before she could speak, her phone buzzed, a high-priority text. She read it, and all the color drained from her face. "What is it?" I asked. "Port Florentine," she said, her voice a hollow whisper. "Our new Intel Cades team just confirmed it. Madigan knows the data is gone. He's not running. He's cleaning. He's rigging the entire warehouse, the server farm. He's going to torch it." "When?" "Friday night, Nasiawa Senate said, in 2 days. If that warehouse burns, the data we have is just numbers. We lose the physical evidence, the servers, the hardware. The case will be reduced to he said, she said. It'll be words against words. We lose everything." Wayne didn't smile. He just won. "My client's offer. Agent, he knows that port. Every vent, every access tunnel. He's the only one who can get you inside before Madigan lights the match." Sennett looked at Wayne, then at me. Her shoulders slumped. "Get him." They brought Zoran in. He wasn't in his tux. He was in gray detention center scrubs. He looked smaller, but his eyes were the same. The moment he saw me, the exhaustion vanished. That cold, analytical fire was back. "Zoran," Sennett said, her voice clipped, "I'm agreeing to your terms. Conditional cooperation. You will be released into my custody. You will wear a GPS ankle cuff. You will be armed, but with our equipment, you will be on a very, very short leash." Zoran didn't even look at her. He looked at me. And her. "What about her?" Sennett asked. "She's not a witness anymore," Zoran said, his voice rough from disuse. "She's an asset. She's the only one who's seen the data structure. She's the one who taught me the legal language, the language their Ashfall data wipe system is built on. I can get us to the terminal. She's the only one who can stop it." "Absolutely not," Sennett exploded. "I am not taking a civilian into a war zone." "She's not a civilian," Zoran said, his voice lethally quiet. "You, Deke, Madigan, and we've all burned that out of her. She's the key. No Lena, no deal. I'll take my chances in court." Sennett looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Tell him no." "I'm going," I said. Her face crumpled. She knew she'd lost. "God help us all. I'm trusting her judgment. Zoran, not yours. Not for a second, Annie." The next 24 hours were a blur. We weren't in a safe house. We were at a BEI black site, a tactical operations center. Cade was there, his arm in a heavy sling, his face pale. He and Zoran didn't speak. They just coexisted, two opposing poles of gravity. Orion was there, too, released under the same deal, his fingers flying across a keyboard, a silent shadow to Zoran. The plan was a 3-pronged spear. "Arya, your team hits the north gate," Zoran said, pointing at a blueprint on the main screen. He was in his element, a general at his map. "Loud, fast, a full frontal assault, you draw their security." "Cade," he said. Turning to his former friend, Cade met his gaze. "You know their power grid. You and your BEI team cut the lights to sectors C, D, and F. But you leave the central office block, you leave that for me." "And us?" I asked. Zoran pulled up a smaller schematic, a ventilation duct. "We go in silent, we go in dark. We have 12 minutes from the moment the lights go out to get from this vent to the central office and kill the Ashfall system before Madigan activates it." I was zipped into a black tactical vest. It was heavy, stiff, a safety coat, they called it, armor. I clipped the mercury pin to the inside, a secret lifeline to a man who was now officially on my side. Just before we geared up, Zoran pulled me aside. The room was humming with the quiet, tense energy of men preparing for a fight. He didn't say, "Be careful." He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He pressed something into my hand. It was a piece of paper, folded into a tiny, intricate origami crane. I unfolded it. It was a map, hand-drawn. Not a blueprint, but a memory map. It was drawn in shimmering silver ink. The lines were precise, perfect. It was the route, the vent, the ladder, the server racks. "Why?" "Ballpoint ink smudges," he said, his voice low. "Silver archival ink is waterproof. It won't run. From the sprinklers, from the rain." He folded it back into the crane. If we get separated, if the comms go down, follow this wing. This one. It leads to the fire escape. Get out. I looked at the tiny, beautiful object, a map, a promise. We need signals, I said, my mind racing back to the glass house. No comms, silent, we need... I know, he said. He lightly touched his own wrist. This means danger. Sniper, trap, go defensive. He tapped his shoulder. This, hide. Get into cover, now. He then brought 2 fingers up, resting them just on his collarbone. This, he said, his eyes locking with mine. This one means get out. Run. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just go. Wrist for danger, shoulder for hide, collarbone for run. I nodded. Time to go. Sennett called from the door. I turned to go. Zoran's hand caught my arm. He pulled me back, into the shadow between 2 server racks, and he just held me. He wrapped his arms around me, his tactical vest pressing against mine. He buried his face in my hair for just a second. I wrapped my arms around his waist, clinging to him. It wasn't a kiss. It was more intimate than that. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. I will find you. I will not let you drop. We will survive this. I could feel his heart, thump, 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 steady as the earth. He let me go. His face was a mask again. We walked out to the transport. Arya Sennett was at the comms station, her face illuminated by the green glow of the screens. She looked at us, at Zoran and me, 2 broken pieces from 2 different worlds, now a single weapon. She keyed her mic, her voice going out to all teams. All stations, this is command. We are green to go. Tonight we either break this goddamn cycle, or it swallows every last one of us. Port Florentine was not a port. It was a nation of steel. It was lit up like a maximum security prison, casting a sick yellow glow against the low clouds. The massive container cranes were silhouetted against the sky, unmoving like the fossilized ribs of giant, prehistoric beasts. The wind was a living thing, ripping in off the Pacific. It was cold, sharp, and carried the smell of salt and diesel fuel. Cade, now. Zoran's voice was flat in my earpiece. We were crouched behind a concrete barrier, half a mile from the main building. Across the yard, a bank of floodlights flickered and died. Sector C. A second later, another bank went dark. Sector D. The perimeter alarm started. A low, pulsing whoop, whoop, whoop. Not a panic alarm, a power failure warning. They know we're here, I whispered, my back pressed against the cold, damp concrete. They know something is here. Zoran breathed next to me. His body was a coiled spring of pure, focused energy. Move. We moved. We didn't run. We moved in a fluid, crouched walk. From the shadow of one shipping container to the next, the ground was gravel and steel tracks. In the distance, the sound that made my stomach clench dogs, deep, frantic, rolling barks, a canine unit sweeping the west perimeter. Zoran grabbed my arm, pulling me into a narrow, pitch-black gap between 2 towering stacks of red containers. A canyon of rust. They're on the wrong side, he whispered. Cade's team is drawing them. We go now. He pointed. The main office building, our target, a single 4-story cube of lit glass in a new sea of darkness. We ran across the open ground. It felt like a year. I could feel the invisible crosshairs on my back. My heart was a drum against my ribs, a fast, frantic rhythm. I pressed my back against the cold steel of the building wall, gasping. Zoran was already at the ventilation grate, the one from the silver ink map. He didn't pick the lock. He used a small, hydraulic wedge that popped the bolts with a dull, muffled thump. "Orion, we're in," he murmured into his mic. "Copy." Orion's voice was tinny in my ear. "BEI is engaging the north gate. The diversion is live. You're on the clock. Lena, good luck." We climbed a metal ladder in a dark, narrow shaft. Zoran moved like a spider, silent and sure. I just tried to keep my boots from echoing. We emerged into a sterile, white service corridor, and I saw it. On a massive flat-screen monitor on the wall, a red banner was flashing. Ashpal Data Destruction Protocol initiated full system wipe in 12:00, 11:59, 11:58. 12 minutes. I breathed. My blood went cold. Zoran, we're too late. We're on time. He didn't hesitate. He kicked open the door marked server control. The room was freezing. It was a cathedral of data. Racks upon racks of servers, a city of blinking green and blue lights, and in the center, on a raised platform, a single terminal, the altar. I slid into the chair. The screen was a wall of code, the countdown timer blinking in the corner, 11:09, 11:08. It's asking for an admin password, I said, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A 32-character key. I can't guess this. You don't, Zoran said, his hand landing on my shoulder, steady and warm. Look at the prompt. Lena, your world, your rules. I looked again. Under the password field was a single line of text. Execute final underscore erasure as per authority, granted under Statute 404, B of the Corporate Charter. They weren't just wiping the data. They were creating a legal paper trail to justify it, claiming it was a routine, scheduled deletion. My words, my weapons. My fingers flew. I wasn't typing a password, I was typing a legal injunction. I ignored the password field and tabbed down to the query. I typed, stay underscore execution, authority 18U, S, code, section 1519, destruction of federal records. Ashfall Protocol is now under active investigation by the BEI. All data is frozen, pending judicial review. I hit enter. The timer on the screen froze. 10:14, 10:14, 10:14. I gasped. It worked. It's paused. Very clever, Miss Quintero. The voice was amplified, metallic, and came from everywhere at once. We looked up. On a high metal catwalk that ran the length of the server room, a man stood, silhouetted against the fluorescent lights. Madigan. He was tall and thin, in an expensive suit, and he was not alone. He had his hand clamped on a figure. He dragged them forward into the light. It was Arya Sennett. She was cuffed. He had a steel restraint, a rigid collar, locked around her throat, forcing her against the catwalk's railing. The girl and the ghost, Madigan sneered. His voice was calm, amused. You just put my entire system into legal limbo. Very, very smart. But this, he yanked Arya's head back. Hard, she gasped. This is a much simpler system, an analog failsafe. He held up a small, black object, a portable hard drive. This is the real ledger. My friends, the master key. The one thing that Drive You Planet at the casino couldn't copy. The identities of my partners, the offshore accounts, everything. He dangled it over the railing. It was a 30-foot drop to the concrete floor. So, here is the trade. You unfreeze my system. You let the Ashfall Protocol complete its run. Or I drop the agent, and then I drop the drive. Your choice. Lena, you get to save your data, or you get to save the law. You can't have both. There's a third option. Zoran's voice cut through the hum of the servers. He stepped out from behind the rack, into the center of the room, into the harsh white light. He held his hands out, open, away from his body, way. Let her go, he said. You don't want the agent. You don't want the girl. You want me. The Argent Street Syndicate. I'm the one who funded this. I'm the one who gave them the keys. She's just a hostess who got in too deep. The small red light on his GPS ankle cuff blinked. A single, accusing eye in the white room. Take me, Zoran said. It's a much better trade. Madigan laughed, a short, dry bark. You're right, Jovanovic, it is. He began to raise a pistol, aiming it at Zoran. I looked at the screen. The timer, 0604, 0603. It wasn't paused. It was just running at a crawl. It was a trick. It was never stopped. 6 minutes, I looked at Zoran, my heart hammering. I brought my hand up, my 2 fingers landing right on my collarbone. Run! The signal! Run! Now! Zoran saw it. his eyes locked with mine. He gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible shake of his head. No. He wasn't leaving me. He wasn't leaving Senate. He took a deep breath. "Cade," Zoran roared, not at Madigan, but at the ceiling. "The cable now!" "What?" A sound from outside, a sharp, deafening crack, like a giant whip, a metallic scream. One of the massive container cranes, its main cable severed, crashed into the side of the building. The entire structure groaned, the catwalk shuddered violently. Madigan was thrown off balance. In that split second, Aria, a trained federal agent, didn't hesitate. She slammed her elbow back into his ribs, twisted her wrist against the collar, and broke his grip. She was free. B.I., move, 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 Cade's voice, on a bullhorn from outside, guiding the assault team. The stairwell doors at the far end of the room burst open, and BEI tactical agents swarmed in, fanning out. "Deke the smoke," Madigan shrieked, recovering his balance. A small metal canister landed at our feet. It hissed. Thick, acrid, gray smoke exploded outward, filling the room instantly. I was blind. I couldn't breathe. "Lena?" Zoran's arm was a steel band around my waist. He didn't pull me away. He pulled me back, shielding my entire body with his, shoving me until my back hit a solid metal wall, an electrical cabinet. He had put me in a safe corner. I was blind, but I wasn't helpless. My hand tore at my vest, my fingers finding the mercury pin. I jammed the button. A tiny, pulsing blue light cut through the gray smoke. A beacon. Here I am. "Got you," Cade's voice, from the doorway. He was in his sling, a pistol in his good hand, directing the agents. "Target is on the beacon move." The smoke was clearing. I saw them. Zoran and Madigan. On the catwalk, Zoran had vaulted the railing. He wasn't using a gun. It was brutal. Close quarters. A block. A twist. A precise, controlled lock on Madigan's wrist. Madigan was desperate, flailing. He lunged, grabbing Zoran's vest. The railing that had been damaged by the crane. It buckled. It tore free from the wall. They both went over. It was in slow motion. Madigan fell back, a look of shock on his face, but he had a death grip on Zoran's vest, pulling him down. Zoran's feet slipped on the edge. He was falling. "Zoran?" I screamed. I was moving. I wasn't thinking. I lunged forward, my arm outstretched, my fingers closing on something. His hand. I was ripped forward, my shoulders screaming as it was nearly torn from its socket. The pain was a white-hot flash. I had him. I was holding his entire weight. My feet were sliding on the polished concrete floor. "Lena, let go," he yelled, his voice strained. "You can't hold me." "I won't let you drop," I screamed. The words torn from my throat. The veins on my arm were standing out, my knuckles white. My grip was slipping. He was too heavy. A single sharp crack. A gunshot. Not at me, at Madigan. Aria Sennett, on one knee on the stairs, her sidearm steady in a two-handed grip, fired once. The bullet hit Madigan in the shoulder. His grip on Zoran's vest spasmed, and he let go. He fell, a heavy, silent weight, crashing onto a server rack below. He wasn't moving. Zoran was still hanging from my one arm. "Hold on!" Cade and Orion were there. They grabbed him. They grabbed me. They hauled him up, over the broken edge of the catwalk. I collapsed, my arm a numb, useless thing. "Lena, the screen!" Zoran yelled, scrambling to his feet. I looked. The timer. The firefight had reactivated the system. Ashpal protocol resumed. Wipe in 0030, 0029. I couldn't get up. My arm. Zoran was at the terminal. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a typist. 0027. He looked at the terminal, then followed the thickest bundle of cables from the CPU to a panel on the floor. He ripped the metal cover off. It was a mass of thick, black wires. "Which one?" he yelled at me. "All of them," I screamed. He didn't hesitate. He wasn't trying to save the system. He was trying to save the data. He jammed his free hand into the bundle, grabbed all of it, and pulled. A shower of blue and white sparks, the lights in the entire building, The entire port went dead. The monitors, the sirens, the blinking red countdown. Everything vanished. We were in total, absolute darkness. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, echoing in the vast, silent room. Then, from the harbor, a new sound, the long, deep, resonating horn of a cargo ship heading out to sea. It was a sound of release, a sound of the world, which had been holding its breath. Finally, letting it go. The BI conference room at dawn was a study in gray. Gray walls, gray metal table, gray, exhausted faces. The only color was the red, angry gash on Cade's arm, now professionally stitched. Area Senate was at the head of the table, nursing what looked like her 10th coffee. I sat on one side. Zoran sat on the other, in a clean, borrowed sweatsuit, the GPS cuff still a black bracelet on his ankle. "Let's be clear," Arya said, her voice a raw scrape. "This is not an acquittal. This is a deal." Zoran's lawyer, Marcus Wayne, nodded sharply. "The terms are agreeable." Arya looked at Zoran. Not as a prisoner, but as a colleague. A dangerous, unwelcome colleague. "You will provide a full, unredacted map of the Madigan crew's international shipping lanes. You will assist in the recovery of their offshore assets. An agreed-upon percentage we settled on, 40%, will be repatriated into the Federal Victims' Compensation Fund." Zoran just nodded, once. "In exchange," Arya continued, "the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southwestern District will place all pending charges against you and your associates, namely Orion, in abeyance, pending the terms of a long-term, court-mandated community supervision." It wasn't a pardon, it was a leash. But it wasn't a cage. Arya stood up. She walked over to Zoran. She didn't offer a pen. She offered her hand. Zoran looked at it for a second. Then he stood, and he shook it. A single, firm, binding motion. The law and the shadow, striking a bargain in the flat. Morning light. The fallout was swift. The news cycle was brutal, but controlled. The data I'd saved, and Zoran's subsequent testimony, was an avalanche. Deke Lomas, seeing no way out, took a plea. He got 15 years. Madigan, who had woken from his coma with a profound new respect for gravity, was facing a trial he couldn't possibly win. Yuri, that was the one that stung. He was arrested for conspiracy and racketeering. The man who had been my manager, who had sold me out for an envelope of cash, was gone. Marrow and Mint was shuttered, its neon sign dark. A high-end tombstone for a life I'd never really known. I received a letter on heavy official BEI cardstock. It was a formal commendation, thanking me for actions above and beyond the call of civic duty, for saving the data, and for rendering aid that directly resulted in the preservation of Agent Sennett's life. I met with Sennett one last time, in her office. "I don't want it," I said, sliding the letter back across her desk. "It's not a request. Lena, it's a fact. You're a hero." I'm a hostess, I said, my voice firm, "and I'd like to stay that way. I want my name kept out of it. All of it, the reports, the public record, please." Arya looked at me, a long, appraising stare. She saw I wasn't negotiating. She nodded. "I'll seal it. As far as the world knows, the case was broken by a long-term, anonymous inside source." "Thank you." Zoran had his own housekeeping to do. The Argent Street Syndicate wasn't a business you just quit. It was a network, built on those rules from St. Axioms. Loyalty as a transaction. He held a meeting. I wasn't there, but Orion told me about it, in a single night. Zoran tore down his own empire. He released his people from their contracts. The old, binding, blood agreements, he just let them go, gave them a choice. He restructured. The Argent Street Syndicate died, and in its place, he filed the paperwork for the Argent Street Initiative, a fully legitimate, registered foundation. Its sole purpose to provide funding, scholarships, and legal aid to the boys leaving St. Axioms. He was breaking the cycle, using the money he'd made in the shadows to pull other kids out into the light. It was his penance. his purpose. A few weeks later, the air was warm. The city felt possible again. The nightmares had started to fade, replaced by the mundane. We were walking in Echo Park. It was a Saturday. It was so painfully, beautifully normal. The sky was a bright, cloudless blue. Children were laughing, chasing ducks. The bright pink of the bougainvillea blossoms was almost too loud. Zoran was not Zoran. It was just a man, in jeans and a gray t-shirt, walking beside me. The GPS cuff was gone, replaced by the terms of his supervision. "Your name is clean," he said, his voice quiet, blending with the sound of the paddle boats on the lake. "The BEI sealed your file. As far as the world is concerned, I never existed in your life. You reported a fight, and that was the end of it." He stopped, turning to face me under the canopy of pink flowers. "I can make that real, Lena. I can disappear. If that's what you want, I can be gone. You can have your old life back." It was the final test, the final choice. My old life, the one with the broken window locks, the cheap apartments, the fear. I smiled, a real smile. "Zoran," I said, "you were never a stain on my file. You were the marginal note, the one in the column, in silver ink, the one that made the whole stupid story finally make sense." He just looked at me. His eyes, which I'd seen as cold, then analytical, then fiery, then exhausted, they were just soft. He reached up, not with his palm, but with the back of his hand. He gently, so gently, brushed his knuckles against my cheek, the same cheek he'd bandaged in the kiosk. It was a question. I leaned into his touch. I nodded. The kiss was nothing like the one in the soundstage. That one was about survival, a desperate clinging in the dark. This was life. It was warm. It was slow. It was shockingly simple. It was a promise, made in the bright, unfiltered sunlight. I could hear a child shriek with laughter, far away. I wasn't afraid. I was just here. He rested his forehead against mine. "Lena." His phone rang. He sighed, a sound of profound frustration. He pulled it out. "It's Senate." He answered, his voice flat. "Jovanovic." He listened. His body tensed. "When I see ya, and this is non-negotiable, I understand." He hung up, but he didn't put the phone away. He just stared at it. "What is it?" I asked, the familiar cold prickle of fear returning. "The deal," he said, his voice a low growl. "The U.S. attorney for the Southwestern District, he approved it. He signed off on everything, but he added a condition, a last-minute clause." "What condition?" Zoran finally looked at me, his eyes dark. "My supervision, it's not just checking in with a parole officer. For the next 18 months, I am to serve as an anonymous, off-the-books consultant to the BEI, to Aria Senate." He wasn't free. He was contracted. He was a ghost, shackled to the very law he'd always skirted. He was their weapon. This was the last trap. It wasn't just a leash for him. It was one for me. His world, it was now permanently, legally tangled with the BEI. There was no clean escape. He was waiting for me to be angry, for me to tell him to fight it, for me to run. I looked at this man, this impossible, complicated, dangerous, gentle man. I reached out and took his hand, the one that wasn't holding the phone. "I'm here," I said. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't a vow. It was smaller than that. It was better. It was durable. He stared at our joined hands, and then, for the first time I saw Zoran Jovanovic smile. It was a small, tired, but very real smile. That night, we were on the roof of his new apartment, a converted warehouse in the Arts District. The city was a galaxy of lights at our feet. We had a blanket, a bottle of cheap red wine, and a bag of tacos. The local news was playing on a small TV by the door. A ticker scrolled along the bottom. Interstate money laundering ring collapses. Federal grand jury indicts. Madigan crew. My name was nowhere. I took the mercury pin from my pocket, the small metal wing. I looked at it, then put it away in a small wooden box. It had done its job. I sat down next to Zoran on the blanket. I leaned my head on his shoulder. His arm came around me, pulling me close. He took my hand, his fingers lacing with mine. It was a quiet, solid language. It said everything we didn't need to. My phone rang. I frowned, pulling it out. Unknown number? I answered, "Hello? Is this Lena?" The voice was a woman's. It was thin, and it was terrified. "My name is Sarah. I used to work with you at Marrow and Mint in the kitchen." My blood ran cold. "Sarah, what's wrong?" It's the new manager," she whispered, her voice breaking. "At the new place he opened. He's doing it again. The same thing. The envelopes. And he told me if I ever said anything, I didn't know who else to call. You were the only one who called for help." The cycle. It wasn't broken. It was just reset. I looked at the city. I looked at Zoran. He was watching me, his expression calm, knowing. I took a breath. I wasn't the girl behind the hostess stand anymore. "We're not just survivors. Zoran," I said, my voice quiet, but hard as steel. "We get to help other people survive too." He looked at me, and the last of the shadows in his eyes finally receded. He nodded, his gaze soft. "From the night you reported a fight, Lena," he said, "you reported a whole new life. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you listening from? We'd love to read your comments and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It would also be a huge help if you could support us by hitting the hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.